Hello. Welcome back to Andrew's Take. I want to apologize to you all for my uh, unen unexpected absence. I know I kind of went silent there for a few weeks. I just had to deal with some big changes. But things are settled down now, so I'm ready to get back at it. And a major development has happened in the world, right? The U.S. Iran war. So let's talk about that. This will be the first of several episodes covering the U.S. Iran war. This will just be sort of broad, but later. Over the following few weeks, we'll go into some different aspects of it, like how it's affecting, the economy, and what are international actors doing, and things of that nature. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. That really helps the channel out. So hit that subscribe button, and you can expect content now going forward weekly. So no one is surprised that the Americans and Israelis have been so successful with their airstrikes, and they have. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and top leadership were killed in the early days of the war. Airstrikes and naval operations have quickly and decisively destroyed a significant amount of Iranian war making capabilities. The Iranian counterattacks have claimed the lives of 7 American soldiers and injured over 100 so far. My thoughts and condolences to those families of those fallen soldiers, and my well wishes to those injured. As this war continues, please keep them in your thoughts. But Iranian counterstrikes have failed to cause the comparable damage and casualties to the United States side. Their counterattack was sporadic, sometimes hitting Gulf states' buildings and injuring non combatants. Um, the US, Gulf state, and Israeli missile defense systems have shot down a majority of Iranian drones and missiles, although there have been incidents where they've been getting through and hitting targets. Uh, it should also be said that the Iranian school that was hit, possibly by a U.S. airstrike, it looks like the U.S. were operating in that vicinity. That is a human tragedy, and we'll discuss a little bit later the ramifications from that tragedy. And there should be an independent investigation, and uh, the Congress needs to get down to the bottom of what happened there, because that's truly unacceptable. The US also has released footage of the destruction of an Iranian warship and has stated that it has destroyed 16 mine layers, right? These are important ships for the Iranians for their threat in the Straits of Hormuz, this vital shipping lane of uh, oil and natural gas. This is a clear indication that the United States seeks to destroy Iranian capabilities, right, of disrupting the oil and the LNG trade through the critical Straits of Hormuz. If the goal of the US and Israeli administrations was to destroy Iran's war making capabilities and capacity, then they have the right to claim some genuine success. If, however, their goal was regime change, they have almost certainly failed. Of course, we don't really know what their war aims are because they have not been clearly articulated to the American Congress or people, which strikes many Americans who have personal memories of past wars in the Middle East with a great sense of deja vu and dread. It is worth saying that this is an entirely different situation than Afghanistan or Iraq and should be understood in its own context. US hopes of another Venezuela with Maduro's ouster or Libya with the quick toppling of Gaddafi happening here in Iran, this is a far fetched belief. Okay. And that's because Iran's institutions are multi layered and durable. You have to remember Iran is not a monarchy, right? It's a theocratic republic. Khomeini was 84 and did not do much of the daily running of the state. Iranian institutions will persevere, and so will this regime. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the pro regime militia, the Basij, still have significant capacity to suppress any dissent from the people. Therefore, they would stifle any internal movement for regime change. Without boots on the ground, airstrikes can only achieve limited aims. Ground forces would be required, and that is something the American people will not tolerate. Like every administration for at least the past 4 decades, this administration highly overvalues the use of air power to effect change on the ground, which is the most typical American strategic sentiment. More on that later. The US has had plans and the capabilities to do what the administration is doing for decades. We've had the plans. I read a book 10 years ago discussing plans from the 90s and early 2000s about US strategy for attacking the regime. But no other administration made the calculation to act on those plans. So, why did the administration make the calculus? They didn't. The Israelis did, and the administration followed their lead. You may have heard the progressive intellectual Noam Chomsky, also featured in the Epstein files, calling Israel our vassal, right? This is a clear jibe at US Israeli relations. If Israel is our vassal, then they are the worst vassal in history. Of course, they are not our vassal because that term vastly underestimates Israeli sovereignty. Now, if you have the urge to make this, recent conflict a Republican Democrat issue, part of the never ending us versus them tug of war, then you're simply being partisan because unilateral military decision making by the executive branch is as bipartisan as it comes. This war with Iran is the latest example of an overpowered executive branch and a weak and feckless legislative branch. So, when did Congress abdicate its duty to the American people and allow a single person to bring the nation into war? Well, this stems from the Vietnam conflict during the Cold War. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed in response to alleged attacks on U.S. naval forces in the Gulf of Tonkin. This resolution, it authorized President Lyndon B. Johnson to take, quote, all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression, end quote. LBJ was essentially given free rein to bring the United States into a full blown war without a declaration. Now, the War Powers Resolution of 1973 was meant to curb the power given to the executive during Vietnam. The resolution created a 60 to 90-day window for presidents to commit troops without prior authorization. Its purpose was ultimately diluted, though, by the presidents using airstrikes only or committing troops for a short period before they were required to get authorization. Then 9/11 happened, right? And in the shock and anger at the attack, Congress once again abdicated its war decision responsibilities to the executive. A week after 9/11, the 2001 authorization for use of military force was passed into law, giving presidents the freedom to oppose terrorism anywhere without their prior approval. 4 administrations, Democrat and Republican, have used the resolution as a justification for military intervention in at least 22 countries. Congress, although a poor model for enacting people power, is supposed to represent the interest of the people. For too long, they have allowed themselves to be a rubber stamp for a too powerful presidency. If Americans ever want their troops to stop being killed for the whimsical fancies of politicians, bureaucrats, and generals, then they need to vote and think that way. The American people must demand more of their representatives and stop supporting global war under the guise of patriotism and partisanship. I urge you to, if you don't already, to incorporate this idea into your political worldview. Now, I'm going to briefly return to the topic of US air power. In the future, I will do a whole episode explaining US air power, since it is the crux of US global hegemony and our military industrial capacity. For now, I'll leave you with these thoughts. American militarism has seeped into the strategic thinking of Americans, where they overestimate and overvalue military power's use to solve problems around the world. Simply put, the US seems to think it can bomb its way out of problems when most of the time it cannot. Americans give far more credit to bombs and missiles changing situations on the ground than the actual change agents. This is a sentiment as old as World War II, and I'll go into it deeper in the future. But understand that the US military hammer cannot turn all of the world's problems into nails. It just doesn't work. Also, the forever fear mongering crowd that loves to say every conflict is a start of World War III, right? I've been hearing this. Um, Let me put that to rest right now. This is not the start of World War III, okay? You cannot have a third world war without Russia and China, both of whom are unwilling to commit military troops and hardware to help the Iranians. It's simply not in their strategic interest to risk war with the US over Iran. All right. That's all I've got for you this time. I know that was a bit brief and sort of a broad overview, but I wanted to give you some thoughts to mull over. In the next few weeks, I will produce some episodes focusing on specific aspects of this war and the ramifications of it. Um, I do apologize again for my hiatus. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to the channel, and I'll see you next time.